The Unmarked by Matt Fleagle. Chapter 7. Why Falrinkle Dances. Kaleb took a deep breath and stared at the hulking bear, whose crooked teeth were just visible beneath its black lips. "A branch severed from that sacred tree is worth nothing," Kaleb said. "Surely the tree's power is not bound up in one broken branch." "I wish I could say that you were right," said Falrinkle. "But the truth is that one branch carries enough magic within it to give the stone renders immense power. That is, if the scout who stole the limb can get it home without interference." "What interference?" said Kaleb. "What could stop the stone render from getting it home? No one dwells in the forests between our lands and theirs." The warden nodded to Glista. "That's where we come in, Kaleb," she said. "And us," said the second bear. It was the male bear who up till now had not spoken. "And of course you, Kaleb Dellblood," added the warden, flashing a wrinkled smile at the bewildered log splitter. "What can I do?" Kaleb said. "What should you do is a far more important question," replied the warden. Glista rose from her seat. "Kaleb, you must understand that we need all the help we can get to stop that scout. He is already a half day ahead of us. But he should not reach my city until tomorrow morning, and we might catch him if we leave soon. You are the strongest and most capable among your people to endure the physical demands of this journey into Ableron. And you bring with us the blessing of the forest spirit, who, as Falrinkle already said, has left you unmarked for this very mission." Kaleb balked at this. "I don't know that I am willing to surrender myself to the whims of the forest spirit. That is, if he even exists. The forest spirit in my people's legends is a destructive and confused god. From what I can make of the elders' stories, he curses his creatures with pestilence more often than he blesses them with abundance." Kaleb looked around at the faces of the animals. All the creatures present, even the largest ones, stared at him with what looked like astonishment in their faces. "Why are you looking at me that way?" said Kaleb. The female bear spoke up. "You mean to say, human, that you do not know the story of your people and of the creatures of Parison?" In a shrill hoot, one of the owls on the bear's shoulder said, "Falrinkle, how can this man not know of the Great Divide and of the ordering of Parison's kingdoms?" For the first time, Kaleb realized that the warden did, in fact, have a name. Falrinkle. In fact, Glista had just used it. "He would not know," said Falrinkle, "for his people have been living under the spell of myths for many centuries." "What are you saying to me?" Kaleb asked the old man. "Does not the story go that the ancient myths were given to us by the forest spirit? Are these stories not true?" "Well, some myths are truer than others," the warden said. "All I mean is that your people know what they were meant to know, for as long as they were meant to know it." Kaleb groaned. "None of what you're saying makes any sense. It's like I'm arguing with someone in a dream." Before the warden could answer, one of the coyotes sitting at Falrinkle's feet piped up. "I have an idea. You must dance for him, Falrinkle," the beast urged, forgetting for the moment not to let his tongue hang out of his mouth when excited. The other animals echoed the sentiment. "That's right. Show him how you dance." And, "Dance us the history again, please, Falrinkle. It's been too long." The warden smiled and shook his head. "Friends, we have little time. Glista and the others must depart soon." "Please, Falrinkle," pleaded the coyote. Kaleb glanced at Glista, whose previously subdued face had now lit up with childlike anticipation. Perhaps she had witnessed this dance before. For his part, Kaleb had no idea how any man of the warden's age and infirmity could dance at all without snapping his frail legs. But Kaleb noticed that even the restless female wolf abruptly retired from her pacing. She quietly knelt down near the foot of Kaleb's table, looking up expectantly at Falrinkle. "Tonight we have much to do," the warden said, wrinkling his forehead and sighing. "But for Kaleb's sake, I will dance the story again. Our travelers," here he looked at Glista, "may need the comfort of ancient stories to brave their long journey tonight." "Dance the story?" Kaleb muttered. "That's right. The warden can only dance the story," said one of the owls in answer to Kaleb's question. "Otherwise it cannot be told properly. No words given to man or beast can quite relay the story's meaning. But Falrinkle knows the ancient language of dancing, the forest spirit's own language." "Quiet down," said a Simbine near Glista's feet. "He's starting." Kaleb looked back at the warden, who had shuffled over to a wide-open place in front of the ornate purple tent. With some effort, the warden stepped onto a chair seat, and then from the chair up onto the broad table that the animal council had sat behind during the meal. Kaleb worried that he might fall and glanced nervously at his companions, but none of the beasts showed the slightest bit of concern that Falrinkle might topple down from the tabletop. A moment after ascending the table, the warden's gnarled wooden cane began to shimmer from top to bottom with a glittering emerald light. Then, to Kaleb's astonishment, the cane's ornate head began to emit a sweet music, but without any instruments or strumming or blowing. The sound of the music wrapped itself around Kaleb's senses, with the feeling you get after plunging yourself into warm water at the seashore. It penetrated Kaleb's body and mind, stirring and calming him all at once. Falrinkle then lifted his gnarled hand from the cane, and remarkably both he and the shining cane stood on their own. Kaleb watched as the old man's face, still leathery and stubbled with prickly gray hairs, transformed before him. A bright, enveloping glow masked his age. Gravity and wisdom beamed from his eyes, and his limbs seemed somehow to strengthen in the light. The warden straightened up like a strapping young man, and with arms outstretched, he gracefully descended the table and began to move lithely throughout the courtyard. In later years, and despite many determined attempts to explain it, Kaleb could never relate to anyone what it was like to stand among those creatures and watch Falrinkle dance, nor to listen to the magical music swelling up from some invisible source, perhaps from the ground itself. The music was as jolting as a peal of thunder, and yet as soothing as the quiet babble of a shallow stream in winter before the replenishing rains of spring. But the warden's dramatic steps were what broke Kaleb's heart. With each new and impossibly elegant movement, Falrinkle swept the humble log splitter up into an inspiring revelry, only to dash Kaleb's heart again with the next step of the dance. Each step was like a word, deliciously dramatic and gripping. Though Kaleb could have never retold the story, he felt it vividly in his very bones, like a memory that will never fade, even after decades pass. As the warden's dance spun its magic, no one in that motley crowd felt like a listener, passively taking in the performance. Instead, each one present felt as though caught up in the dance itself, privy to the old story, which came to feel as though it had snapped out of the current of time and pulled the audience into a grand and eternal present. As Falrinkle danced, Kaleb somehow came to understand the actual history of Parasun, going back thousands of years. He felt the pangs of longing for the world as the forest spirit first made it, luxuriant and beautiful and unbroken. It was the sweet unity of this vision that stirred Kaleb the most. In the vision, he saw animals and men, some with hair as black as the stone renders and others as fair as his own, dancing together and sharing meals in flat meadows across the open and lush plains of Parasun. Then, with a strange chill, Kaleb felt the sting of treachery, as the stone renders and Dellbloods, whispering and clasping calloused hands together in dark corridors, forged an accord to enslave the animals to their use. Whips cracked across the hides of the wolves and bears. The owls were caged, and some of the smallest animals were impaled on crude spears and arrows to be consumed by men as fowl and meat. Finally, Kaleb, eyes welling up in tears, sensed through the music the heart-wrenching, anguished cries of the forest spirit himself, who, though invisible to the creatures of Parasun, was possessed of inordinate goodness and superior wisdom. The forest spirit called across creation to the anguished animals, and his cries broke their chains and smashed the doors of their cages. He herded the mishandled creatures into a territory hidden from the men of Parasun, erecting rock partitions and dense forests at its borders to hedge them in. This land of hiding he named Terrashine. Then the forest spirit brought the brutal pact of the human factions to an end, setting an ornate stone in the center of one domain, Ablerin, which the stone render settled, and a massive tree in the center of the other, Glenward, where Kaleb's own people built their village. Here the two human parties, hobbled by frightening myths and rumors of blessings and curses, rarely ventured out of their separate domains for centuries. What was more, to each people the forest spirit gave a mark, which bound these two people groups to a cloistered way of life and worship. For the Dellbloods, a scar was engraved in their foreheads, and for the stone renders, a scar was engraved on the back of their necks. But the forest spirit's discipline, though severe, was not devoid of mercy. For to the stone renders the forest spirit mercifully endowed a gift for craftsmanship of metal and stone, and to the Dellbloods skill in farming and woodwork. The forest spirit knew that the two communities, now fearful of each other and fettered to their myths, would be forced to rely on each other's divergent skills to survive. Occupied by trading and building, these men gradually forgot about the animals concealed within Terrashine. The creatures, Bando, bear, Simbine, and owl alike, faded to myth. A sort of fragile truce had lasted centuries in these outer lands of Parasun. Yet it was the final movement of the dance that burned itself into Kaleb's memory for the rest of his days. He watched in wonder as the warden leapt onto the head table again to complete the dance. Falrinkle's every motion was now backlit by the shimmering aura of his cane. The steps of the dance flew quicker and quicker until Falrinkle looked like a blur of pulsing, sparkling light. In the final moments of the dance, Kaleb came to understand that throughout the centuries since the markings began, whenever the forest spirit required a special work to be done, something miraculous and heroic, he suspended the ancient curse and allowed a human to be unmarked. When he heard this, Kaleb's very skin seemed to turn to light and his bones into cast iron. He thought he could snap a tree in half with his bare hands or wrestle a bear to the ground. As the wild and wonderful gamble drew to its close, all the animals stood at rapt attention, entranced by the story. Then the music of the cane trailed off like the distant echo of thunder as normal forest noises filled the courtyard again. All the assembly sat in quiet reverence for some time, letting the afterglow of the ancient dance wear off from their senses. Eventually, the green glittering light from the warden's cane started to dim. Falrinkle, breathing hard, but glowing with a look of otherworldly glory that washed over his entire countenance, crawled down feebly from the table. His muscles and skin grew leathery and pale again. After a few moments of silence, the animals broke into rapturous applause as Falrinkle rested his brittle bones once more on the top of his wooden cane. As the scattered claps of their paws died off, the creatures heard a stifled noise they did not recognize coming from behind them. They swung around as one body to discover the source of this unusual sound. It was then that they saw Kaleb, hands folded around the handle of his upside-down axe, weeping with wretched shakes of his broad shoulders. Falrinkle parted the sea of animals and shuffled forward on old man steps to reach the log splitter. When he reached Kaleb, the warden stared hard at him for a few moments until the young man's weeping subsided. Kaleb sniffed and wiped away a few lingering tears from his blue eyes. "I had no idea," he muttered. "I never knew the story of this world was so beautiful, nor so full of betrayal and lies." Falrinkle nodded, but said nothing. "And I still don't understand what I can do to help Glista or the beasts," Kaleb said. The warden took a deep breath. Then he said, "You are here, my child, because this world we all share, animals and humans alike, is about to change. The spell the Forest Spirit cast to protect these lands has been warped by the cruel heart of one powerful person. And now you, Kaleb of the Dellbloods, along with these others," here he motioned toward Glista and a few of the larger animals, "have been welcomed into the Forest Spirit's plan to save this beautiful world from chaos." "Then I will go," Kaleb said. "Good, for you must leave now, for dawn is breaking and the thief of the sacred limb will not waste time returning to Ablerin." The warden turned toward Glista. "Glista, you and the beast whom I selected for this mission will track him down as quickly as you can. Retrieve that branch. It must not reach the stone renders, or our efforts to save this world may be wasted." With that, Falrinkle motioned to the black wolf and to one of the bears. Together with Glista, the beasts exited the courtyard through the opening in the rock tunnels. Just then a tiny hedgehog stood up on its hind paws and discreetly dropped a beautiful and fresh orchid fruit into Kaleb's tunic belt. "You may need that to keep your strength up on the way," it said meekly. Kaleb smiled at the small creature. "Thank you." "Go now," said Falrinkle to Kaleb. "Time is running out." Kaleb lifted his axe off the ground and slung it onto his thick shoulder. He approached the passageway through which the bear, the wolf, and Glista had passed moments before. Turning in the doorway, he looked back at the wrinkled warden. "Thank you for that dance, Falrinkle." The warden nodded as he leaned on his cane, surrounded by a throng of nervous creatures. A moment later, Falrinkle and the animals of Terrashine watched the log splitter pass through the rock wall and disappear into the darkness of the tunnel.